How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Apples and Genos Fantasy Hockey Podcast. My name's Josh Hutchinson. I've got John Binkle with me as usual here today. How you doing, bud?
Good morning, brother. I'm good. Sipping
Yeah,
coffee.
sipping coffee. Yeah, it's morning today. We decided to do this early. We're doing a makeup episode to finish off our divisional previews. We weren't able to record last week, so we're going to combine the Atlantic and Metro today. And then right after, we're going to record our first midweek episode. So we're very excited about that. We're just going to be chatting all day long. Hopefully we don't lose our voices, or at least all morning long. So hopefully we can bring the energy.
Yeah, I apologize about the delay. My wife and I had our first anniversary last week, and as much as she wanted to be like, yeah, absolutely, record your podcast, she was also like, it'd be great if you didn't. So
it's okay, bud. It's okay. I would have done the exact same thing. So thanks again for leaving us a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If you haven't and you're enjoying our content, please just take a second and leave us a review. We would greatly appreciate it. Also, check out the Apples and Genos Discord server. It's a great place to talk fantasy hockey, get your questions answered, and also receive alerts when new Apples and Genos content drops. So let's go. We are going to start here with the Atlantic Division. Again, our format that we've been using for these divisional previews, we've been talking about a must-draft player, a player that we've been punting, and a potential sleeper for each team. So we're going to start in alphabetical order with the Atlantic Division. We're going to start with the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins, I think, are an interesting team. They have a lot of injuries early in the year, and a lot of people are down on them. And I just can never not. I can never rule the Boston Bruins out. I'm too hurt by the Boston Bruins. But to be, for me, the must draft there is David Pastrnak. He was completely disrespected in ADPs this year. 24.9 in Yahoo, which is almost outside of the second round in 12-team leagues, and then 15.81 in Fantrax, which to me is still a little bit low. He's a late first rounder at worst for me. He gets ton of shot volume. He's one of the best in the league in terms of shots. He's gonna be right near the top of the league in goals as well. He'll be a point per game, if not better. He had a down year last year. He had a lot of personal stuff going on. I believe they lost a baby before the season started.
Yeah.
I just think, and ultimately he just had a ton of bad luck. He was generating chances even when he wasn't scoring. He was still generating the same amount that he typically does. Just wasn't going in for him. So he'll be playing with Krejci, which is nice early in the season. I think Krejci's looked pretty good in the preseason, and hopefully with Taylor Hall. But right now it's Pavel Zacha. Zacha's also looked quite good. So Taylor Hall's hurt. I think he'll play on that left wing when he's back.
Not sure how long he'll be out.
I'm not 100% sure, to be honest, but hopefully not too long. I didn't hear anything about like a specific timeline, so I believe I think week to week rings a bell. So yeah. Hopefully that's not a bad sign.
I don't remember seeing anything concrete, but it's gonna be nice when he comes back for them.
Absolutely. So Pastrnak is going to be leaned on for offense, especially early. They're going to play the shit out of him. He's going to still play that same spot on the power play. And I just think he's going to have a great year. What do you think, bud?
There's a ton of value in that late second round. There's a lot of like really excellent players who just kind of got bumped a little bit. Between him and JT Miller, they're right there at the top of the list for me. So both of those players kind of disrespected ADP wise, and the production you're going to get out of them is phenomenal. I have found myself drafting Miller just based on how my rosters shake out. I've tended to gone right wing and defense in the first round, so it has led me to go more center in those second and third rounds. But Pasta is huge, and I think you're absolutely right. I mean, like that is serious late first round talent that you're getting for late second, early third round levels. So,
yeah. My punt, I don't know if this is really a punt so much as it is I felt like people were drafting him higher than I would draft him. And I'm probably completely wrong on this, to be honest. But
I think so.
for me, it was, I'm honestly not incredibly confident with this choice, but I had to pick somebody. My pick was Charlie McAvoy in a points league. McAvoy is a bangers monster, does play on the power play, but he's set to miss significant time. He's going to miss a couple months. And in my opinion, doesn't move the needle enough offensively to stash him at least as early as he was going in some drafts. I felt like it was like 7th, 8th round. And I felt like there were healthy defensemen that could probably get you as much value for more time, like for guaranteed. Well, I don't know, guaranteed. Nothing's guaranteed. Like anyone can get injured, but
more guaranteed than not being
more
on
guaranteed
roster.
than not being on your roster for 2 months, essentially. So I felt, I felt like he was just being drafted a little higher than my liking, at least in the leagues that I was in. So
emotionally, I disagree with you. I'm still finding myself drafting him to my IR2 slot. But like factually, you're absolutely right. There are better plays out there where you're having to draft him because you're going to have that, even if their production, like pace wise, shakes out in Charlie's favor. It's just better. Like you have to roster players that are going to play. So
yeah, you have to make the playoffs, right?
Right.
So my sleeper is Jake DeBrusk. So he seems to have a spot in the top 6 right now with John Montgomery, and until Marchand comes back, he's going to have a spot on PP1. So I think he seems happy now that Bruce Cassidy's gone. I feel like he may flourish and have a breakout here. Especially just getting that opportunity in the top 6. I mean, hopefully he keeps that opportunity in the top 6 when Hall and Marchand come back. But I could see he's definitely a right wing option as well. He's dual eligible, I think, in most leagues. I don't know how much he's played right wing, but I could see him sticking in this top 6 here.
I absolutely could see that too. Him and Krejci are both big upside plays for very little, if any, draft capital. Probably really often a waiver wire ad. Like both of those guys have been like steady waiver wire ads for me as I have drafted players specifically that were hurt or drafted players that got hurt and had to replace them on the roster. Those both are players that I'm looking at really, really heavily. I like the opportunity a little bit better for Krejci
sure.
while Marchand is gone, but both of them could really, really serve you well this season.
So let's move on to the Buffalo Sabres. So my must draft is Tage Thompson. He was getting drafted in the 90s to hundreds in ADPs, and at least in the leagues that I was in. Tage Thompson is top line center, PP1. He's going to be in Fantrax. I believe he's dual eligible with right wing, but not in Yahoo. I think he's just a center. So a little more value in Fantrax than in Yahoo. But Tage Thompson is awesome. Super high volume shooter. Really broke out last year, and in my opinion, there's no reason to believe that he couldn't do it again this year. Obviously shot at a bit of a high percentage, but I still think that he's going to get that opportunity. And man, he looked so good in the preseason. It looked like he was picking up right where he left off. So not that the preseason really means much, but I like Tage Thompson a lot.
So Turn the Tage is my absolute favorite team name pun out there. And I think it really fits. Like he is the new chapter for them. There's a lot to be excited about in Buffalo, and he's leading that charge. I feel like he kind of took the place of Zegras in all of these draft spots where Zegras got hurt and got bumped down the line, right? And I think the value, I think it's right there. I think the value is right there for the exact same reasons. He's going to be in every play for a team that needs somebody to make plays. It's a great pick.
Yeah, I think Zegras gets you more points, but Tage Thompson overall will probably score more goals, get you more shots on goal, and he hits a little bit too, which Zegras doesn't do. So little bit, in my opinion, they're comparable value. My punt for the Sabres is Eric Comrey. So I'm not super confident about this again. I had to pick somebody. I was seeing him being drafted in late rounds. I think there are probably better options to take a shot on at this point in the season. There's guys like sub 50%, like Vitek Vanacek, who I think is the clear cut 1A right now in New Jersey. Philip Grubauer, who's pretty low, like not rostered very highly. Guys like that are just going to be guaranteed to play. And even in somewhat better situations than Buffalo. Buffalo is going to take a step, I think. But I really don't know what their goaltending situation is going to shape up like. Eric Comrey is a guy that has performed really well in a very small sample size, but he hasn't really gotten volume. I imagine that they're probably hoping that he's the 1A, but I just don't know. So I think that's too much of a wild card for me to have been drafting, but I would definitely put him on your watch list for sure.
I think the indicators for their goalie tandem are going in opposite directions, right? UPL has had some really awful stat lines in limited work, and Comrie has looked wonderful in limited work. And the fact that the team doesn't really know tells me that we don't really know either. If you're in a dynasty format, I think Comrie is somebody you should go and shop for before anything good happens. But in a redraft league, I'm punting every Buffalo goalie and I'm punting them into the sun. Like I don't even care until I absolutely am being told by 2 0G monsters at Apples and Ginos like who I should care
about. So my sleeper is, I mean, there's a number of sleeper options on the Sabres. They've got a lot of young talent that's going to play this year. But Owen Power was drafted in the 170s in Fantrax, especially in a Bangers Cats league. I think he's gonna bring you some peripherals. Reminds me a ton of Victor Hedman with his size and skill. I think he's the real deal. All of the prospect analysts, all of the scouts are saying he's just unbelievable. I don't think he's going to get PP1, but I think he's worth taking a shot at like for your fourth and fifth defenseman. I also think there is potential early in the year, if he's not like playing exceptionally well, that he may fall onto your waiver wire just because he was a bit of a late round draft pick. So a guy that I would look out for, because I think he's going to get better as the year goes and as he feels more comfortable and gets more experience. But I also think they're going to play him a ton. Because that Buffalo defense sucks.
Yes,
and outside of him and Rasmus Dahlin, there's not really much there. So I am interested in Owen Power.
I am also very interested in Owen Power. I think you're absolutely right. I think the trajectory of young defensemen in that 300 game threshold is going to come earlier for him because they are just going to ride him out, right? They're just going to keep throwing him out there because he's not going down, and he's definitely the future of their defense. So, they need a second pairing like as bad as any team in the league if they're going to be successful. But, I'm personally cuddled up to Jack Quinn. Yep. Power is a step further in the development level, but the raw ability of Quinn offensively keeps me coming back. And the fact that I have seen him across the preseason be on the first line is just, it's sexy. It makes me feel good. He's a huge dark horse for Calder winner for me.
Yeah, they're definitely shuffling the right wings around on that team. I've seen Tuck and Jack Quinn and Victor Olofsson kind of moving all over the place. So we'll see what they do there on line one. The Detroit Red Wings. So the Detroit Red Wings are a much improved team. My must draft, and a guy that I drafted, I think in 3 different leagues, is Mo Seider. I think he had a fantastic season last year, was a top 5 fantasy defenseman in his rookie season, gets peripherals, hits, blocks, plays on power play 1. Their power play 1's improved this year, in my opinion, adding David Perron. So I am very excited about Mo Seider, and I'm hoping that he takes another step this year.
Absolutely. I'm huge on Seider. I was before. A year under his belt is only going to make him a smarter player in the NHL, and he was already really smart with the puck to begin with. I want to say Larkin as my must draft, just based on what you have and will have to spend in a draft to get Seider. It seems like he's going in the third round when I want him to be a fourth round pick. Like every time he's lined up in my queue, he goes 5 picks before me. So I want to say Larkin, but the depth at true center is really baffling, especially at that level. So, Vorp wins. You want Sider more, but I think your draft probably feels a little bit better if you got Larkin in the 11th round as opposed to Sider in the 3rd.
Yeah, Larkin in the 11th round would be unreal. My punt here, oh man, this is I'm not sure about this punt. I wrote this a little bit ago. So okay, my punt is Bertuzzi if he gets bumped off of PP1 for Vrana, but if not, I think I still like Tyler Bertuzzi. But Jacob Vrana I think is a really good pick. I'll talk about him because he's my sleeper. But if Bertuzzi gets bumped off PP1, I'm not as stoked about him getting drafted in the mid rounds. I don't think I have Bertuzzi in any leagues, but
I do. Yeah, all offseason I banged the drum for Vrana, and then only to end up drafting Bertuzzi a lot across leagues. So the dual eligibility swayed me a bit.
Yeah.
I think the opportunity is there for both of them. The ceiling that we see for Vrana, if he's healthy and in a great situation, is probably a little bit higher. But I am kind of it moves the needle for me that Bertuzzi is guaranteed going to play all of the games for them this year.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference.
And not miss any like eligibility problems.
Yeah.
And historically he's a little bit healthier. So it's there's not a punt for me for them. I think you're right. There's not really a punt, but there's what has Nate been saying? There's a lot of contingent upside across the second level for them.
Yeah, absolutely. They just have a lot more depth this year, and I'm not really upset with where anyone was drafted. I don't think, in fact, a lot of times guys like Lucas Raymond, I think, was being underdrafted. I think there's still a bit of disrespect for the Red Wings. My sleeper, like I said, is Jacob Vrana. He was drafted at like 175 in Fantrax, so pretty low. He's got improved personnel around him. He's got like an actual second line to play on if that's where they decide to put him. It seems like they probably are going to put him there. He's only ever had more than 15 minutes time on ice once in his career, and that was in an 11-game stint in 2021 with Detroit. Injuries are a risk, like we said, but late in the draft or on the waiver wire, the upside is massive. So if he's out there, he had a 60-point pace last year in a small sample size, but I think that's not unrealistic for Jacob Vrana, especially if he plays on PP1.
Yeah, Vrana is, I think, probably the most prime sleeper in the NHL. Detroit is one big sleeper as a team, really. So if LA is a wagon, Detroit is a chariot, man. Like, I'm really excited.
That's a play on words, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I feel like that.
I'm a wordsmith.
that translates better when you can see it, but that's a Sherrod pun.
You like that?
I like that.
I'm clever in the morning. You didn't know that about me.
No, it's good. It's good, bud. The Florida Panthers. So, they have a lot of must drafts, and a lot of guys that I think were slipping a little bit lower than they probably deserve to. So obviously this team overall, I think they lost some depth both up front and on D. But I still think they're going to be a good team. Obviously, they were the President's Trophy winners last year. They still have Alex Barkov, who, he's one of my must drafts. Matt Tkachuk as well. Matt Tkachuk's a guy I actually, in a Bangers Cats league, I got him with the 24th pick at the end of the second round. And I felt like that was too low for Matt Tkachuk. It was good value for me. Sasha Barkov is a guy that's been falling, I think, primarily because he's a center. So he was going mid-second round in a lot of drafts. I think he probably could have gone a little higher than that. And then Sam Reinhart's a guy that, could potentially play first or second line and PP1 on this team that's very good offensively. And he was going in like the 5th, 6th round. In some leagues, he's got dual eligibility. He's like center right wing in Yahoo, just a right wing in her. I can't remember which is which, but he is dual eligible in either Yahoo or Fantrax. I can't remember, but man, that's some great value. So those are probably my 3 must drafts.
Yeah, I'm happiest with Matt Tkachuk, but I was won over by him years ago, before the point season last year. One of the biggest storylines of the year will be how Matty fares in Florida. You have to see a drop off coming for him with the change in the team and that like natural penchants for the stats to dip in a new town. But if not, watch out, because that's an elite level player. Clearly, we've seen it where he hit a whole second gear last year. I agree. I think Florida is going to be a worse off team, so it's a little bit harder for me to make that assumption about his season. But of those 3 players, he is my must draft. And Reinhart is dual eligible in Yahoo, so significantly more valuable there.
Yeah, absolutely. My punt. So this isn't so much a punt because I feel like he's going to get more starts this year based on the way Paul Maurice was talking. But Spencer Knight in Yahoo, his ADP was 74.5, and he was a 13th highest drafted goalie in Yahoo. And in a lot of leagues was drafted higher than Bobrovsky. So I don't know. And this was before Paul Maurice came out and talked about this. Not really sure why this was the case. But that's way too high for Spencer Knight, especially when, I mean, he got the contract. It was a bit of a strange contract. I don't think they really needed to pay him that much. And now they got they've got about $15 million locked up in goaltenders for the next 4 years. So, I mean, they got to play him a bit, I would think, but I just don't know. I just don't know why he was being drafted that high. So in that way, I still think Knight is going to have some value. I just think he's like rostered way too high right now.
Yeah.
As a potential like 1B, but like, I mean, Bobrovsky was a volume starter last year, so I don't see why they would make it. And I mean, there's no reason other than Spencer Knight is good and young, and he needs to get experience to be decreasing Bobrovsky $10 million Sergei Bobrovsky's playing time. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't get the willingness to take Knight over Bob, especially with like no discussion across the board about it. It would seem like people were just kind of picking one of the two of them and choosing to draft them in that slot. I don't see this tandem as one of those draft the team, not the goalie volume situations, i.e. Toronto, Colorado, Ottawa, etc. I think we're both predicting a drop off for Florida this year. Defensively, they're going to be quite a bit worse, and they weren't excellent last year. I mean, they got bombed on quite a bit. Of those two, I absolutely would be picking Bobrovsky, but I actually haven't. Like, it's not a situation that I want the headache of. It's not Buffalo where it's just going to be terrible no matter what happens, and you're just kind of hoping you pick the right choice. I think either one of them are going to be okay, and you're going to have to spend to find out if you were wrong, and I don't want to do either of it. I feel like they're going to trade one of the two of them at some point for some depth, right? Like, for considering what they lost in the offseason, I feel like they have to go and spend one of these goalies, but I don't know how you trade those contracts.
I don't know how you trade them either. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to trade Spencer Knight because he is young and you've invested so much in him. But he is the more tradable contract because Bobrovsky, you're paying him $10 or $10.5 million. And that's just not a tradable contract. People are not paying goalies like that now, and he's definitely not. I mean, he's a great goaltender and he's won multiple Vezina trophies, but he doesn't have the consistency of like a Andrei Vasilevsky or a Igor Shesterkin, right? So he's not at that level. But I guess part of my angst with Spencer Knight is I do have shares in Bobrovsky in a couple leagues. That's
but now you're hoping
the highest quality goaltender that I drafted in my league. So and I did that before Paul Maurice came out and said Knight was going to play more. So
hey, great
I'm
work.
hoping that Bob still plays a fair bit.
I think you're probably right. I think that's probably the safe bet. I don't know why they wouldn't continue to season Knight.
Yeah. My sleeper is Anton Lundell. So at times or at least for one practice during the preseason, he took reps on the wing with Barkov and Verhaeghe. I don't think that he's going to play there a ton, but it shows that they're willing to try, and that to me is all I need. So his ADP was 214.88 in Fantrax, so low, especially after the season he had last year just playing on the third line. Anton Lundell is going to be awesome, and I could see him moving up the lineup a bit, and even just taking a step, just being 1 year older. I believe he's 21 this year, so I really like Anton Lundell, and I mean, he's pretty available too. Like, he's a guy that you could probably get on the waiver wire. So be looking out, especially I think next week, not this week, but the next week, Florida has a pretty nice schedule. So take a look at Anton Lundell.
Yeah, Lundell is quickly going from sleeper prospect to a certified keeper. Probably the last year you got him after pick 125. It remains to be seen how exactly he's going to get used for them, but when he does get that usage, the underlying stats tell you things are going to go well. So definitely a player to watch.
So the Montreal Canadiens. So this is a little less. There's a little less depth on this team. We'll put it that way. So for me, the only two draftable players were Suzuki and Caulfield. So I picked Suzuki in the couple, and in that situation I was fading centers, picked a lot of wingers in D early, so I got him around 120, which I think is really great for Suzuki, and I think he'll probably outplay his draft capital there. Cole Caulfield's another guy being drafted around 100. He's a guy I have in a league too. I think he's going to be awesome this year. High shot volume. He's probably going to score a lot of goals. Outside of that, Montreal doesn't really have much, and I don't think they're really going to do much. So Suzuki and Caulfield, really like that. Suzuki also was day to day this past week, which gave me a free streamer spot to pick up. I believe I streamed Oscar Lindblom and Ely Tolvanen. And Tolvanen actually worked out really well. I'm doing quite well in Cupfall.
Yeah, he's no Luke Kunin, but
no Luke Kunin and no Kevin LeBanc, which we'll talk about later. But it freed up a spot for me there.
Yeah, I just can't get excited about Marty Saint's squad, man. I just can't do it. Suzuki is a pass for me considering the depth at C. Like, you're telling me you faded C, and I'm like, you faded it hard if you're drafting Suzuki. And Caulfield doesn't move the needle enough for me yet. Like, there's so many other wings that I'm excited about that I'm drafting. I think it's probably just personal bias against the Habs, but it has sexy pace last year, but I'll wait.
My punt, I mean, you could punt basically everyone else on the team. Like, I don't think that anyone is really being overdrafted on the team. Like, Suzuki and Caulfield are really the only guys that people were looking at. I can't actually think of another player. I took Mike Matheson, I think, with the last pick of my draft, in a draft that I finished in early September, because I was thinking he was going to get PP1. Right now he's not getting PP1, and I actually have him as my sleeper. We can just talk about punts and sleepers because I don't really have anyone to talk about for punts. I said Kirby Doc, but he wasn't really being drafted. So, I mean,
I would call Jake Allen probably my
punt
sure on this team.
Your punt? Punt or your sleeper? Oh, okay.
No, my punt. Yeah, like starting volume is great, right? But starting volume on a bad team, it had better match up to the settings of your league, or you're going to get eaten alive.
Yep.
And there isn't a situation that I see happening for them this season where you are getting anything from Jake Allen except for saves, volume, and starts. Like, it's going to be a bloodbath for them. So,
no, that's fair. I still think there is some value in terms of volume. If you're willing to punt some save percentage and wins, I guess. But yeah, in leagues where volume is favored and the penalty for goals against is not too huge, I mean, I still don't think he's a bad bet.
Oh, I do.
Because he's going to get volume.
He
All
is.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he is, but he
disagree.
also has a tendency to go down when he's relied on. So
yeah, that's true.
We'll see.
That's very true. Let's move on to the Ottawa Senators. I don't want to talk about the Habs anymore.
That feels good.
I mean, their must draft was Brady Tkachuk. Is still a guy that I think was a little underdrafted, but obviously, I mean, he is the ultimate peripherals monster. He's a unicorn, probably a 70-point guy, potentially more. He's shot at a very low shooting percentage for his whole career. I don't know if that improves with better personnel around him, better power play personnel, but I think Brady Tkachuk is the obvious must draft in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him and his ceiling point production wise, maybe not being really any higher than it is. Him just kind of being the player that he is offensively, and about how we don't, it's going to level out. Whether it's a wash, whether he takes a step forward with the new talent or kind of takes a backseat to the new talent. But rising tide lifts all boats. So it's going to be good no matter what it is.
My punt is, I mean, this isn't a complete punt. Again, I just felt like the ADP was insane for Claude Giroux. In Yahoo, he was being drafted at 55.5, which is just crazy. For someone playing on line 2 with new line mates and that likely won't be playing on PP1, I just think that's wild. I don't think Giroux does enough to be worth that draft capital. But I mean, he's still a useful player. It's just not a guy that I have in any of my leagues.
Yeah, same. I mean, he's gelling very well with DeBrincat thus far.
Yeah.
Like, he's eating apples for lunch and dinner. 55 does not feel right though. Like if you're going to draft a player with that deployment, it really isn't him. Like, people really bought the narrative super hard for this offseason. And I think you're going to be able to trade him in packages, trade for him later in packages to get what you want out of him versus what people had to pay to draft him.
My sleeper is Jake Sanderson. So I think he's in a very similar situation to Owen Power, where he's got Thomas Chabot ahead of him, just like Power has Rasmus Dahlin in terms of power play time. But he'll probably get power play too. He's also just going to be leaned on D because Ottawa's D is bad. So I just think he's in a very similar situation. Maybe not as highly touted as Owen Power, but he's there. He's right there, and he's going to get played a lot. So another guy that I think is worth a look, and he's much more available than Owen Power. He's drafted. His ADP in Fantrax is 226, so he was barely even drafted. But I think he's probably going to have a decent year. And I don't know, could be a surprise Calder candidate. I don't know. I'm not as. I mean, defense. It's hard to win. It's hard to win the Calder as a defenseman, especially. I mean, unless you're Mo Seider and unless you're getting PP1 time.
I was going to say. I mean, Mo Seider got thrown.
He got all the
right into the fire. Yeah, and that's not going to happen with Sanderson. Like, no. Sanderson is the future. I've been putting him on my watch list first thing after draft, so I can be the vulture when he's dropped, and or just right there at that baseline for rosters. So definitely going to be a player that I am expecting to take off this season as they improve and the results come out. But yeah, I mean, contingent upside at best right now.
The Tampa Bay Lightning. So Tampa Bay is going to be great once again. My must draft is Nikita Kucherov, and that's evident in my drafts because I have him in a couple different leagues. So in the couple, I drafted him at 5, which, I mean, when you compare to ADPs, is a bit of a controversial pick. But I mean, man, if Kucherov
not when you compare it to production, though.
Yeah, I mean, especially point per game pace, he's been pacing at 100-point pace for the last
millennium,
3 or 4 years that he's played. So at 100 to 120 actually. Last year it was close. It was over 120.
Yeah, it was like 100 and 124.
Yeah, something like that. Like he would have been second in the league if he'd played all games and stayed at that pace. Obviously, we don't know that he would have stayed at that pace the entire year, but I just think Nikita Kucherov is an unbelievable player. You just gotta bank on him staying healthy, which is why he slipped a little bit in drafts. I've seen him go at like 8th, 7th, 9th. So, and I think that's a little disrespectful to Kucherov. But yeah, the injury risk is real, but I'm still banking on him this year.
I disrespected his ADP last year in drafts, and I will never do that again.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So my punt here, in terms of the draft, I guess, I don't know. This guy is probably the best streamer on their team, but Alex Killorn, I think, reached his ceiling last year. I don't think he's going to get the same deployment this year unless they have significant injury. They've seemed to wanted to load up line one. They've run with different lines. So when they've loaded up line one, it's looked like Stamkos, Kucherov, and Braden Point. When they've split them up, they've actually put Nemesnikov on line one. So Killorn's just not getting that top line deployment, and I don't think he's going to play on power play one either. So I just don't see him really pushing past that ceiling. I think, or that career year last year. I think he's a 50-point guy, and a solid streamer to come in and out of your lineup. And I also think they're pretty high on Nick Paul and Ross Colton, who also play left wing. So I just don't see him moving up the lineup when there's injury.
Yeah, it seems like everyone not named Victor, Nikita, or Andre is a possible punt for people out there for Tampa Bay. Like we really just don't know what to expect thus far. They've been trying a whole bunch of things because they have a concrete production that they're going to get from their top level players, and they're, I think, kind of a lot like Toronto, or just kind of trying to figure out what the bottom six looks like for them. I've got shares of Paul, I've got shares of Colton, I've got shares of Killorn, because I really couldn't call it. Could be any of them. I just want to take this moment to say I blame Corey Perry. Whatever it is, it's Corey's fault. I've been blaming him since he was here with the Stars. My punt is Corey Perry because I hate Corey Perry.
Did you hate him when he was with the Stars?
Yes.
Because I feel like he had a good playoff run, actually.
Oh, yeah, he did.
Yeah.
And you know what else he did? He took inopportune penalties in huge moments. The entire year, I told one of my best hockey friends here in Dallas, I blame Corey Perry. It's going to be Corey Perry's fault. And then we went on a cup run out of nowhere because of Kiviranta smoking the Avalanche. Yeah. And, yeah, at the end, I was right. It's all Corey Perry's fault. And I punt Corey Perry. Nobody drafting Corey Perry, but I punt Corey Perry.
My sleeper is Mikhail Sergachev. So his ADP was 130.84 in Fantrax. I think he's going to get more ice time this year and more opportunity with Ryan McDonough out the door. So I think he's a great option when the power play one quarterbacks are scarce in the draft. Obviously, a lot of people are done drafting now, but Sergachev gets peripherals and points. If he's available in any leagues, I'd be jumping on that. He has an injury right now, but it sounds like he's going to be back for week one or for game one. So I think Sergachev's going to have may have a bit of a breakout year, or even just the best year of his career. I just think he's going to get more opportunity both defensively and offensively.
He's absolutely got the talent. He's got the opportunity. I think I'm a bit more excited about McDonough in Nashville than I am what he's leaving behind in Tampa. But that super dry tier of defense, he's probably the highest on my list.
Yeah, once those PP1 QBs are gone, I think he's right at the top. The Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's talk about them for a second. I'll try not to drag on too long because I tend to just get way overexcited about Toronto. But Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares, they're all must drafts.
That has to feel good to say.
That big four, it sure does. It sure does. It's nice to have that big four. Beyond that, I don't know that anyone is really a must draft other than maybe Morgan Riley. Morgan Riley is definitely a must draft, actually. But outside of that, I mean, everyone else is kind of a bubble guy, but there are some guys with sleeper potential. I don't think anyone is really overdrafted. In my opinion, on the Leafs, I may be a little bit biased, but
I don't think
yeah,
so.
we'll talk. But let's just move into sleepers because I don't think there's really any punts there.
No.
I don't know. Maybe you disagree. That's just my biased opinion.
I mean, I'll say this: I never draft Riley. Like,
Sure.
I didn't last year. I didn't this year, and I think he might be the least sexy fantasy player out there. I never punted him on purpose. He was always just like the sixth person in my queue at defense. Like,
And there's always a Leafs fan that wants him more than
I have never done it, and I couldn't tell you whether that's a good thing or not.
I actually feel the same way about Riley. I value him slightly lower than a lot of the guys in that I would say second tier of defensemen because I think he's right there. He's still a great contributor. Like I think he's going to be great on your fantasy team, but there are guys that are drafted around him that I think are probably a little more valuable. So my sleeper, this is a big sleeper, man. This is probably the biggest potential sleeper. I mean, potentially might not really play that much, but
might sleep. Might stay asleep.
Right now, it's Dennis Malgan. So if you're asking who is Dennis Malgan,
I'm asking that.
Yeah, I mean, so Dennis Malgan played in Florida for a while, low in their lineup. And the Leafs traded Mason Marchment for Dennis Malgan, which ended up not really working out super well for them yet. Dennis Malgan played a few games for them, and then COVID happened, and then he went to the Swiss League. But he was over a point per game in 2 seasons in the Swiss League since he left. I believe he led the league in scoring last year. And he's coming into Toronto, had a fantastic preseason, just looked really, really good out there. He's getting an opportunity on line 2 with William Nylander, and they frankly look really good together. He may even start in that coveted line 2 left wing spot when Tavares comes back. We don't know whether or not he'll be back for game 1. It sounds like he'll probably miss a little bit of time, but not too much. But right now it's Malgan and Robertson battling it out for that last spot once everyone's healthy. But for now, it looks like they may both play on the wing with Nylander. So there is a ton of potential with Malgan. I believe he's 0 or 1% rostered right now in Yahoo. So very available. I actually just picked him up in our Dynasty League because there's a ton of potential there. And really our Dynasty League is so deep that there's almost no one to stream. But he's tri-eligible in Fantrax as well. He's center, left wing, right wing. So tons of value there, especially if he stays on line 2.
Yeah, I mean, looking at these aggregate stats over the few years in super limited deployment, he's getting power play points, getting PIMs, taking shots, winning faceoffs at a decent clip. Like, looks like a solid play.
He's just a guy no one knows about. He's also an RFA still at the end of the year because he's only 25 and hasn't played that many NHL games. So this is another one of those diamond in the rough guys that Kyle Dubas tends to find, and I think he could be one of these Michael Bunting-esque players this year.
Yeah, I mean, I have to defer to you here, but I do think Bunting is getting less love in the ADP than he probably should at 144.
Yes.
I mean, for a first-line player that's playing with just 2 ridiculous talents, like I think somehow after the Calder run last year, geriatric Calder run, I think Bunting is somehow still a sleeper. He seems to be going way later than a first-line player with those 2 players.
And they've shown in the preseason that he's their next man up for the power play when someone's injured. So, and we'll probably start there at the start of the year. So that really increases his value. Like that's unreal with him playing net front. It's really nice for Michael Bunting.
I'm just saying, point per game could happen.
I mean, you said it, and right away there's an opportunity for him on PP1, so I may be eating my words here. All right, so that's the Atlantic Division. Let's move on to the Metro. Let's go. Carolina Hurricanes. So for me, Svechnikov and Aho are their must drafts, but I said on Twitter they're one of two teams where I did not draft anyone from their team. So
how are you going to draft Habs and not draft Canes?
I don't know. I think because the Habs are being undervalued, and I think the Hurricanes are being a little overvalued, especially with I mean, they obviously have better personnel, but just the way that Brind'Amour deploys them is the issue. So Svechnikov right now is playing on line 2, power play 2. So that really hurts his value, and he is so disrespected by Rod Brind'Amour. Like Svechnikov has so much fantasy potential and just will never reach that with Rod Brind'Amour as coach. Obviously, he's doing the right things because Carolina is great, but I just think Svechnikov could have more value, and he just is just not gonna reach that. So
yeah, you're planting your flag in it not happening ever, huh?
Well, not happening ever, not happening in the current situation that he's in with Brind'Amour as coach.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I can see that. Yeah, I've been fading Aho and bumping Svech just because I want to believe in the breakout year for him. If there's another echelon in his play, that's going to be so much fun to roster that and to see it happen week to week. This is actually the first year that I have not drafted Aho in a majority of my leagues, and I really have only done that based on the availability of centers throughout the draft. Aho is what you want at a center production, but week to week, I'm always struggling to roster the right centers instead of just having two of the best of them. So I want to believe in Svech, and I'm going to be hurt again this year probably.
So my punt is Max Pacioretty. So I saw him being drafted as a stash in a lot of leagues. I just don't know that he's really that. I mean, yeah, that's tough. That's a tough stash for me. He's not going to be back until at least February. He ruptured his Achilles, and Achilles injuries can be very trying to come back from. See Kevin Durant, see Erik Karlsson. Obviously, Karlsson eventually was great, but that was a long recovery period for him when he ruptured his.
He's a corpse right now, though.
Yeah, he definitely is. There's just not a lot of runway at the end of the year for Max Pacioretty to kind of get back on track. He may be. He may be a great pickup for the playoffs. I just don't think that I just didn't want to use a draft pick on him, really. If he's available in leagues around the time he's coming back, I may take a chance on him because he is obviously an unreal fantasy player, but it's just not an option here.
I mean, he's an injury concern in the best of situations.
Yeah.
Coming back from an Achilles, the Achilles alone would make it a punt for me. He's not even an option for me. If you want to draft a ruptured Achilles, head south to Declare in Florida.
So my sleeper is Seth Jarvis. There's a few different potential sleepers on this team, but I think Jarvis is number one. His ADP on Fantrax is 173. He's not as available in leagues. I actually was looking when I was doing prep for the midweek show. I think he's 65% rostered in Yahoo, so that's a huge jump from last year. Mm-hmm. But obviously, he had a 48-point pace with less than 14 minutes time on ice last year. He's lining up right now on line 1, power play 1, so massive opportunity for him. And yeah, I said here's the worst kept secret in terms of sleepers because it seems like everyone is already on the Seth Jarvis train. But
yeah, too many of us saw the highlights from last year, or it's just too exciting, right? But Jarvis is being drafted like it already happened. I'm a huge fan of Seth, though. The highlights from him are eye-popping. But if we can't depend on Svechnikov to get rollout, like how can we even begin to depend on Jarvis, who completely disappeared for stretches last year after, it was like must add based on what we had seen in recent memory, and then a must drop directly after that because it wasn't sustained at all. So I may have drafted him in a best ball or two, but I just I don't know.
I think the difference here is you don't have to spend much for Seth Jarvis. Or you didn't have to spend much for Seth Jarvis. You might not be able to pick him up at this point. But in the draft, you didn't really have to spend much. Whereas Svechnikov, if you wanted to nab him, you're having to take him in the 3rd, 4th round. And I just don't. I mean, he may return that value. He gets lots of peripherals. He shoots the puck a ton and hits, but he's just not getting the ice time to justify taking him at that level. Or like, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. I just think Jarvis, there is a path for Jarvis to stay on line 1, power play 1, which is a great situation for him. And when you compare that to the draft capital that you needed to get him, I feel like he vastly will exceed that.
He's not the talent level for sure.
Definitely. Columbus Blue Jackets. So Zach Werenski is my must draft there. Obviously, they've got Johnny Gaudreau, they got Patrick Laine. But for me, it's Zach Werenski. I think you're probably going to get the most value out of him this year in terms of where he was drafted. I got him as late as the 5th round in some leagues. I think as the draft season went on, people started being like, "Oh, Werenski, he might be more interesting player than I thought," and he started getting drafted a little higher. So was able to nab him late in a couple leagues, but people started wising up to Zach Werenski. He's going to play on that power play 1 all year with Gaudreau, Laine. Looks like maybe Jacob Voracek, who's still a decent playmaker. I think that's going to be much improved. And Werenski is high volume shooter, scores a lot of goals for defense. Like I would argue, I mean, I think he could potentially be the highest goal scoring defenseman this year. Maybe that's a hot take, but I think I don't think it's that spicy, to be honest. He's been a good goal scorer in the past. So he's my must draft.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely think that, and I have put that into action across many, many leagues. I roster him in most of them. I think he's this year's Letang, like huge value for excellent defensive production. I have him in so many leagues. I don't know that I would go as far as saying he's going to be a top production player, but the opportunity is there if that power play goes like we all think it should go based on just the talent level. If they actually play up to that ceiling, he's going to be right there.
Yeah. My punt is Jack Roslovic. So this is a guy that in a lot of conversations when we were talking about when people were talking about who's going to be the center, who's going to center Gaudreau and Laine, Roslovic was in the conversation a lot of the time, and I just don't believe in Jack Roslovic. I just don't think he is that type. He's a good enough player to put in between there. I think Cole Sillinger and Boone Jenner are the obvious choices to try between those two. I don't like Jack Roslovic. I don't think he's gonna. I mean, he's never really produced. He's shown flashes of brilliance, but like. In between, he does nothing. So I'm not a Jack Roslovic guy, obviously. So if you drafted him, I mean, no judgment, but
no, I'm judging.
Maybe that's a nice streamer spot to open up.
I'm judging you if you drafted Jack Roslovic. We all wanted to believe early in the offseason that it was going to be Sillinger that took that top line center, and it might be months from now. I think it's probably going to take an injury to Boone Jenner for that to happen, which is, as we've seen, more likely than not for at least a stretch out of the season. So hard punt on Roslovic.
Yeah. So our sleeper, we both agree on this, is Boone Jenner, because he is clearly getting the first shot at the top line. Does a ton of peripherally, had a fantastic year last year, highest point pace of his career. And now he's playing with the two best players on the team who are just killers. So, and he's got a spot on PP1. currently. So, man, I'm
very
excited about that. Yeah, very excited about Boone Jenner. He may not stay there all year. He has had injury issues before, but yeah, I think he's a great guy. Available in some leagues, not as as much available as he's been in the past, but I think he's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it was you, Boone. It was always you. Can he carry the load all season? Remains to be seen, but there are going to be a ton of Pavelski points at that net front to his season tied to two shot machines. So,
yeah. New Jersey Devils. So much improved team, in my opinion, at least offensively. I think they've shored up basically every position, not necessarily to a level where I think they're going to be like a playoff team, but I think they'll probably push. They're going to play more meaningful games this year. And the must draft is obviously Jack Hughes. Depending on the league you're in, I've seen him drafted as early as the second, third round, and then I've seen him drafted as late as the 6th, 7th round. Yeah. So it's I mean, if you picked him up anywhere beyond round 3, that's going to be great value, I think, especially in points leagues. Obviously, he doesn't do a lot peripherally, but shoots the puck a lot, and he's going to be a great point getter this year. And obviously, we'll play on the power play on an improved power play. So I'm a big fan of Jack Hughes, even though we talked about him being a high-risk pick. I wasn't super stoked about picking him in round 3, but anything beyond that, I think, is going to be pretty good value.
I'm not bullish that he makes it through 82. I understand why that range is so wide, right? Some people are completely settled on the upside, and some people, are going to have to see it. And I fall at the back of that. Like, I saw him go as late as 82nd. And that was like right where I was like, yeah, this is a must do for me. So I just think the stature and the grind that they're going to put on him is probably going to wear into him quite a bit, especially to be so young and to be their franchise star and for them to be taking as many losses as they're going to. It's probably going to wear him down a bit.
Yeah, my punt here for the Devils is, I mean, I don't think they really have many punts. I think everyone was drafted pretty reasonably or lower than they probably should have. I think maybe Damon Severson, he was drafted in most leagues, but he still brings value even if he's not on PP1, which it doesn't look like he's going to play PP1. They're going to give it back to Dougie Hamilton to start the year at the very least. So I guess Severson, but I'm not really confident about punting anyone on this team, to be honest.
Yeah, Severson is another must-watch player early. Like, Dougie is paid, but Damon has played and played well. I don't know what they're gonna do with Severson. He was talked about as trade bait towards the end of the year last year. I think you probably punt Severson because the upside of Dougie is so high if things work out.
My sleeper, I mean, there's a number of sleepers, potential sleepers on this team, a lot of young talent. But I mean, Jesper Bratt in Fantrax leagues, at least his ADP was 155.55, that's really low for Jesper Bratt. So if you got him there, that's really good value. I think he's going to be fantastic. He's going to play in the top 6, top power play. Another guy that I'm somewhat interested in, especially since he's playing in the top 6 in the preseason. Well, I mean, it remains to be seen whether or not he's going to make the team or play in the top 6. But Alexander Holtz, their rookie, I think he's been on Jack Hughes' right wing with Andre Palat, and I like the way that he's looked. He's going to be an offensive juggernaut at some point in his career. He's got a ridiculous shot.
Yeah, he's a ripper.
He's definitely a ripper. I have him in a dynasty league, I believe. And I'm a big fan of Alexander Holtz and his potential. It remains to be seen whether or not that's going to flourish, but he is not rostered a lot. So a guy to put on your watch list too.
I think Pilata's been a sleeper for me. He seems to be virtually ignored in drafts and talented enough to move on from Tampa and thrive. He's in the best situation that you're not going to have to pay for. He is going to be right there next to Jack Hughes. So if you believe in Hughes and don't want to pay for it, Pilata is your option.
Yeah, he's in a very similar situation to last year in Tampa Bay, where he's getting really great deployment. So so hopefully that will, hopefully he'll be able to perform there. The New York Islanders. So not a huge fan of the fantasy options on this team. I think Noah Dobson is probably the ultimate fantasy pick. I don't think there's a lot of real fantasy relevant players playing on the Islanders, but a lot of guys you can get off the waiver wire for streams, but Noah Dobson I think is probably going to have a good year. I know Nate said that one of his hot takes is that he's going to be a bust. I'm not super confident about that, but I still think Noah Dobson's worth rostering. What do you think?
I think the Barzal value is incredible if he is like prototypical Barzal and not like what happened to Barzal. But if he's that's if he's not on line 2 for whatever reason. Like none of this team makes sense to me. Like should be Dobson, but we're not expecting that much. It should be Barzal, and they just paid him, but they're not going to put him out there in the optimum position. I really don't understand what's going on with the Islanders at all, especially for fantasy.
Yeah, I don't know either. It's a weird team. They got a new coach. It looks like he's a little higher on Kyle Palmieri, which I don't know. We'll see. Okay. He's playing with Barzal right now, and he never really got any deployment last year. So, he's done it in the past. So we'll see. So my punt is basically anyone not on PP1. So right now, PP1 is shaping up like Anders Lee, Brock Nelson, Kyle Palmieri, Noah Dobson, Matt Barzal, which honestly, like based on the crop of players there, that's probably an ideal scenario for them.
Yeah.
Those 5. So basically anyone not on PP1, I would not be rostering right now. And then my sleeper, is like Brock Nelson, Anders Lee, Kyle Palmieri, I guess, like guys that are on PP1 that are completely available in most leagues. They're drafted in the 200s and sometimes even lower. So they're guys that you're maybe going to be able to pick up for a stream when the Islanders have a good schedule. This week they don't really. So I wouldn't jump out and grab one yet, but definitely guys to keep an eye on.
Lee always stands out to me as the value play with the Islanders. I don't want to draft any of them. But when I'm looking over those like waiver wire additions, those players to watch for the early season, Anders Lee always stands out to me as a player that's going to get you production with zero things spent on it.
So let's move on to the New York Rangers. So this team's very top heavy in terms of fantasy options. A lot of guys in the first 3 to 4 rounds. And then not really a whole lot after that. So, my must drafts are Mika Zibanejad. I feel like he fell a little bit in drafts this year, was a little bit disrespected.
How quickly people forget.
Yeah. And even last year he was a point per game and there's potential for that to be higher. Artemi Panarin also dropped quite a bit, mostly because he doesn't do anything peripherally, but he's going to be an assist monster as usual. And then Adam Fox also. I think he's going to be a good. You're really high on Adam. I like him as a must draft as well. What are your thoughts?
Fox is the move for me. I do expect a bounce back from Zib, though. That, like we were talking about earlier with Vort, between a really quality center and a really quality defenseman, I'm going with the defenseman just based on center availability. But Mika is an excellent player that has every reason to come back and be the electric player from a few years ago that was on everyone's best value plays, stalwart on winning teams, on championship teams. Panarin is no longer sexy. I feel like there's a lot of comparison between him and Kaprizov, and Kaprizov goes in the first round and Panarin goes in the late second. So it's must draft his Fox.
Yeah, I feel that. I like Zibanejad too. Although he is only center eligible, so I think that's probably part of the reason why he fell a little bit. But he's in that weird tier with Sebastian Aho, where there's really nice defensemen and nice wingers available. So I tend to not draft Aho and Zibanejad out of that spot. My punt is Alexi Lafreniere. So again, he's you do hate his face, and you're not quiet about it. That's for
I'm
sure.
not. He's a stupid face.
So right now he's lining up on line 3 again, not getting deployment opportunity, and frankly, I don't really know that he deserves it. He hasn't really done a lot underlying. I know Nate's talked about this a lot. A lot of pundits out there are like, I mean, surely he's gonna figure it out at some point, right? He's got so much talent, but so far even his underlying numbers are just not good. So I mean, until he really steps up his game and starts generating more on his own, I don't see there being a breakout there. I could be wrong, but I don't believe it yet.
I am surely going to regret this, but Lafreniere looks like a better player now than the countless times that I have trashed him in his face. With that said, I mean that to say that he looks to be really improving as a literal NHL player. I don't expect him to be a better fantasy player to tie along with that. It seems like he is rounding into the player that he is on that team and not the first overall pick expectations that we have all had for him. Like you're just not going to get that from him unless he just suddenly becomes a different player. And as we know, that doesn't really happen one way or the other. Like players are who they are for the most part. He looks like a much better actual hockey player. He's playing super physical. But I don't want any part of it for fantasy.
Yeah, definitely not yet. And my sleeper is Vinnie Trocheck. So Trocheck went on average in Fantrax at 125.17. I think, man, this guy, there's huge potential here. I know that that's around where he was drafted last year, and people were a little disappointed with how he produced offensively, only had 50 points. But he still bangs. He still gets hits. He's a peripherals guy. He's going to play on PP1, and he's going to play with Artemi Panarin. So that's the best situation that he's ever had in terms of deployment. So I mean, there's huge potential here, and I think that he could outperform that ADP. He's a guy that I picked with my last pick of the draft in a 10-team league. That was, I mean, it's a 10 team league, so it's not as deep.
Even still, that was huge value.
That is massive value. So I'm very high on Trocheck for sure.
Yeah, I mean, my notes literally mirror what you just said. Every year undervalued, and now in the best situation of his career. 125 works for me. If you took him earlier, people are still going to tell you good pick.
Absolutely. All right, so another shitty team, the Philadelphia Flyers. Not a lot of fantasy options here. I would say Travis Konechny is probably the closest to a must pick, but I'm not sure that there are any on this team. Tony DeAngelo has the highest ADP at 120.26 on this team. I think that's crazy. Travis Konechny is 189.49 in Fantrax. So I think he may provide a little bit of value, but man, this team is just not good at all, and they're not going to score much. What do you think, man?
I really want to take Tony D every draft and don't, because he goes way too high. Like I feel like his personal talent level offensively is enough to be rosterable. I wonder if he's got the spite fuel in him this year. I also wonder if him as a fiery personality that seems to be kind of volatile. If he and Torts just butt heads just so much that he never sees the ice or has a meltdown on social media, like I think anything is possible for Tony D. And I want it to be like the best possible thing, but I think it's way more likely that he has an awful season, that it wears on him emotionally, and that he berates some fan outside of the arena one night and gets suspended. Like I think that's way more likely.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention he gets most of his points on the power play, and their power play is going to be terrible.
True,
like there's just no offense on that team. So my punt is honestly, my punt might be Tony D, to be honest, like based on that ADP. I'm just not excited about him. I didn't draft him anywhere. Another punt could be Ivan Provorov. He lost PP1 to Tony D, and I don't think is going to get much power play opportunity. Does a little bit peripherally, so I don't know. I have him in a dynasty league, and that's really the only scenario that I would roster Provorov, because hopefully he gets moved somewhere where he can flourish a little bit better than Philly. But
I bet he feels the same way.
Yeah, I would think so. Do you have any punts? I feel like there might be.
I mean, the short answer is that the Flyers are the Habs of the Metro. Like just like I was talking about with Jake Allen being my punt, Hart is my punt. Find a better team for your volume starter streams.
Yeah. My sleeper. I mean, I don't know that there's many sleepers here. I guess they do have some young talent. I think the biggest sleeper probably is Cam Atkinson, which is he a sleeper really? Like he's been around for a long time, but his Fantrax ADP was 210.61. He's very available in a lot of leagues, shoots more than anyone else on the team outside of maybe Travis Konechny, like we mentioned before. He's succeeded with John Tortorella in the past, and I think there's a mutual trust there. So I expect him to be played a lot. He's one of the players that he's one of the players that has spoken about Torts positively. So, so I think that could be a good situation for Atkinson. I think he'll get a lot of playing time. And even though they're a shitty team, he's still a good offensive player. So maybe a bit of a sleeper there and a nice guy to stream.
I think that's a far better option than what I had in mind. I think Konechny qualifies as a sleeper in this case, but it's probably not going to happen. Tony D, if we're all wrong about his Tort-led production, but it's probably not going to happen. I think the most likely useful player is probably Cam Atkinson, and that tie to Torts hadn't occurred to me, so that's definitely a bonus.
The Pittsburgh Penguins, lots of nice fantasy options here. I think Crosby, Getzel, and Letang are the top fantasy options, all guys that could even outperform their high ADPs or at least match them. I like any of those three. What do you think?
I emotionally hate the Pens, but I really love me some Pens in fantasy this year. Letang was a huge target for me in every draft. I never drafted Crosby, but that's just based on value above replacement at positions. Gensel is another second round, third round pick where you're getting huge value and you feel excellent and very smart about drafting those players. I don't think there's really any downside for their names. Like all of those players are players that you can virtually depend on. Unless there's injuries, and that's just par for the course with the Pens.
I think Malkin also is being a little undervalued.
I have a lot of him too.
He's been going in like the 8th, 9th, 10th round a lot of the time. So that's really good value for Malkin, especially if he stays healthy. And in terms of punts, I don't think anyone was really being overdrafted. I don't really feel like there are many punts on this team. I mean,
I don't either. And I feel like a lot of people out there are punting Rust. Like it seems like nobody wants to pick him. And I don't really understand that. But for me, there's not a punt. I'm happy to draft Pens across the board, especially with the playoff schedule.
Totally. And So that kind of leads us to the sleeper, who I think is unequivocally Rickard Rakell. His Fantrax ADP is 174, and he's still very available. But he's lining up with Crosby and Gensel 5v5, which is just an amazing spot to sit. He had his best seasons as a Duck when he played with Getzlaf and Perry when they were still good. So that's you're not really a big Ducks guy, but they were juggernauts for multiple years, and Rickard Rakell reaped the benefits of that. So this I think is a similar situation for him. So I would imagine he would flourish. And I also think he is the natural next man up if there's an injury on PP1, which typically there is for the Penguins one way or another. So I think Rickard Rakell is going to be a great value player.
Money depth, dual eligible with the best line mates of his career, and we just spoke on some excellent line mates for him in Anaheim. Huge contingent upside, and you're absolutely right. Like if you were to bank on there being a top level injury, you're going to go with Pens, right? It's a virtual lock. So to be first in line for that is excellent. Like you're a very happy person if you're rostering Rakell all year long.
Yep. So last team, finally, this is the last team of our previews, the Washington Capitals. So my two must drafts are Ovechkin and John Carlson. I think John Carlson gets a little bit disrespected. I think he's one of the best fantasy defensemen in the league. Outside of that top tier of Hedman, Yossi, and Makar, he might be the next best guy. And I think he's a guy that I think I got him in the 4th round in one of my leagues. A guy that being drafted in the 3rd. I think he's a guy that's typically undervalued. So he's a really great player. Ovechkin just keeps on fucking rolling, man. Like he does everything.
Yeah, he does.
He's like, I don't know. He never ages. So gonna be one of the highest volume shooters in the league. Gets more hits than anyone else in that top tier of forwards, outside of maybe Brady Tkachuk, but he's going to score more. Ovechkin's going to score more goals and points. So I love Ovechkin, and that's pretty much it. He's a must draft.
Carlson is the chooser for me.
Yeah, in terms of value, I think he returns the most for his draft capital. My punt is probably Anthony Mantha. He's getting picked around the same area as Dylan Strome and Connor Brown, and right now his deployment is line 2, power play 2, which out of the 3 is the worst. Connor Brown right now is line 1, power play 2, and Dylan Strome is line 2, power play 1. So I don't know if that's going to stick, but for now, that's what it looks like. They may start with. So out of those 3, I think Mantha, I would probably punt that.
Yeah, Mantha seems like the punt for me. We talked about this in the sleeper pod, where if you're getting line 1 power play 1 player from them at right wing, it's going to be excellent. We just don't know who it is, right? We're going to have to find out throughout the first part of the season. It's wild that they're all getting the same amount of burn in the draft. Kind of feels like that Colton, Paul, Killorn level, right? Where it was just like, whoever it is going to be an excellent fantasy asset for you, but we don't know who it is. I see Kuzi getting...
We're just not sure.
Yeah, I see Kuzi getting drafted high in the Yahoo ADP and X rank, and I just don't understand it, like for a variety of pretty obvious reasons. He is easily the punt for me. I just don't understand why he's getting drafted, really in general, on top of where he's getting drafted. Like the only reason I would do it is like face-off wins and to be tied to Ovechkin. So,
yeah. And power play 1 time, he had a great year last year in terms of points, but just not a high volume shooter, doesn't do anything peripherally. So, he's a guy that I think if he fell to the hundreds, and I was fading centers, then a guy that I would be interested in, but not a guy that I drafted at all this year. And then my sleeper, I mean, I don't know. I'm not super confident about this, but Dylan Strome is lining up on power play 1 in practice, which will be money for him if he sticks. Not really excited about what he generates himself without the right deployment, but if he gets this deployment, it's kind of interesting. I don't think he's a guy that you hold, but I think he's a guy that could be a nice streamer when Washington has a nice schedule.
I mean, it worked out well for him being tied to elite talent in Chicago. Of the options, my assumption is that it's Connor Brown, but I think it's going to be a crapshoot.
Yeah, Connor Brown, I think, is going to start 5v5 with Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, but it looks like he's not going to slot in on the top power play. Maybe he will at some point, and in that case, definitely Connor Brown. But I think Dylan Strome, as long as he's on power play 1, that's my sleeper. And that's all we got for today. So check out the Apples and Ginos Discord server. Shout outs to the band there for providing our music. Their Spotify link is in the episode description. Give us a rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Binksy is at Binklemania. Nate is at Apples Ginos, and I'm at JustJoshin41. Please practice safe stats and happy streaming. I guess we're streaming now, not drafting anymore. And have a good one, folks.
See you next time.